Okay, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. My name is Thomas Sullivan. I'm with the Office of Court Administration, and I am the project manager for the eCitation project. Sam Lavario is with me as well. Sam is the business analyst for the project, and he's the one that most of you guys have been communicating with at this point. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out to come and join us. This is going to be a fun and exciting project, hopefully, and hopefully it will benefit everybody out there. That's our wish. Just a couple ground rules I wanted to go over real quick. We had a couple vendors that had reached out and asked to join the call, and at this point, we don't want to include any vendors on the project. It could impact their ability to participate in the project at a later date. So we don't want any vendors on the call. We'll reach out to vendors when we're ready to start gathering information from them. But for now, we just want to talk to the court staff, the law enforcement staff, the state agency folks. Goal is to start and end on time. We started at 2. We'll have you off of here by 3. Like I said, I've got you all muted for now so that we don't have any conflicts over the speaker. After each segment of the presentation, we're going to do a short Q&A, and you'll be able to raise your hand on your right side of your screen. You have a little dashboard there, and there's a raise hand feature you can use. There's also a questions box that's down there, and if you want to enter your question in there and send it, and then what we can do is we can answer the questions that way. At the end of the session, for the entire presentation, we'll have a longer Q&A segment as well. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off here. So this project is a project that was originally started in conjunction with the Texas Department of Transportation. We've received funding from them through a National Highway Traffic Safety Act fund, or grant, I should say, to develop a standardized platform for eCitation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Where ultimately our goal is to provide electronic citations from the point of the citation being created to the courts. We hope we can streamline the process for everybody involved, looking at standardized codes for the citations and working on helping to automate integration between the courts and law enforcement, the courts and state agencies to share this data through the process. And just a quick high-level view of what we're talking about as far as what the project's going to cover. So we're strictly talking about parking and non-parking Class C traffic citations at this point. Municipal and justice courts, municipal, county, and state level law enforcement. We are not covering any kind of appeals of citations, no civil citations, and the example given here was like a red light camera. No traffic-related citations, and nothing Class B and above. So at the high level, that's what we're looking at covering here. So this project split, because it's so big, we've split it into multiple years and multiple phases. And so we're currently in the first phase, which kicked off October 1st, but we didn't actually have staff on board until the 1st of February. And it'll end September 30th at the end of the federal fiscal year. And this first year is to gather requirements. And then the second year, which will also be phase 1, will be to create an RFO. After that, we'll move forward in system procurement and development, system implementation, and then in 2019, we look at going into ongoing operations. So our phase 1 milestones that we're looking at, first one was to form a requirements team with law enforcement, courts, Office of Court Administration, Department of Transportation, and Department of Public Safety. That has been done. We have at this point close to 85, 90 participants. By September 30th, we need to, and we being OCA with y'all's assistance, develop and document a requirements document for the RFO, establish any standardized citation data elements and codes, document the hardware and software requirements that would be needed at the local level for implementation of this, and then on the project management side, developing an overall project plan and a project schedule, which we've been working on. That's going to complete this fiscal year. Next fiscal year, we're going to take all of the requirements we gathered this year and develop an RFO that we'll put out on the street probably around the end of May next year. We'll also have to develop or identify our development cost, our implementation cost, and our training costs so that we can put those in the grant request for federal fiscal year 2018. And then we'll need to plan the system architecture and implementation strategy. Longer range, after we have the RFO out on the street, the plan is in the fall of 2017 to have a vendor selected. We'd like them to start as soon into October of 2017 as possible. Then we'll work with the vendor to develop an implementation plan in the spring of 2018. The vendor will either build or modify an existing system. We'll see how that all goes, depending on what the bids are. But that should happen over the summer of 2018, that the vendor will be preparing to provide what we've asked for in the RFO. Then in the fall of 2018, we want to test the system at some selected pilot sites. We'll look for a variety of sites so that we can get a good mix of testing. And then the plan is to take the whole system live early 2019. As far as communications for the project status, I'll be sending out every month a monthly status report. It'll list what the current project status is, any risks we have, which are potential problems that could come up and impact the project, any issues we have, which are issues, there are risks that's happened and now we have to go back and deal with it. How we're going to handle the risks and the issues, the mitigation for those items, and then what our upcoming milestones or targets are. As we move into the project and we start meeting with you folks, as you start learning more about the project, if you have any concerns, you can submit issues or risks up to the project manager, myself, or to the business analyst, Sam, and we'll review those and put them together on the status report. By the way, that first status report will be for April, and it'll probably come out the first week in May. And then we've also got a project website that's live today. You can see it. The link is right there. If you go to texascourts.gov, there's a program services menu option, and when you click on that, then you'll see eCitation listed underneath that. There was some, in the survey, there were some suggestions for things to add into the project website, and we'll be working on those. And there's going to be some things we'll add there, and then we're probably going to build up what's known as a SharePoint site in a few months, and that'll be where some of the documentation goes as opposed to on the website. But definitely information about what's going on with the project will get loaded on the website. And that's it for this segment. If anybody has any questions, if you want to submit your question, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can ask your question. Do you have any, Sam, already?
Yeah, this is Sam Lavario. Welcome aboard. Hopefully everybody can hear us. We've already got a couple of questions. I've answered one of them. The first question was, is there going to be a copy of this presentation posted? Yes, it will be posted. Second question is, may we have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation? Certainly, it will be posted after the meeting. If you want to ask a verbal question, raise your hand and then we can unmute you so you can ask the question so that everybody can hear it, and then we'll try to answer it. Otherwise, the other avenue to send a question in is via the text mode. And if you look at your screen at the top right, there's like a little, I think, envelope looking icon that you can click on to send messages to us. And we allocated about 2 minutes for this, so we'll go pretty quickly. Next question was any project costs for the agency participating in the project. At this point, we're not anticipating individual costs other than possibly back-end programming costs for your agency for like interfaces. If there's an interface, this project would pay for that interface on the system side, but there may be some customizations that may be done, and I would underline may be done on the customer side or your side. We would have to look at it basically on a case-by-case basis to determine where the costs would be borne. But a lot of that information will be borne out during the requirements gathering phase.
What if we're working on our own? If you're working on your own eCitation program, then what we're looking at is a wide level. So we're looking to interface with the various agencies out there. So if you have something you're working on, we would just interface with yours. Our goal is not to replace anything that's out there and working today, but our goal is to provide interfaces so that we can move data, like I said, between the law enforcement agency and the court, the interface there, and then also be able to have that same data available for the Office of Court Administration, Department of State Health Services, TxDOT, and Department of Public Safety as well.
A couple of more questions. Did I hear you correctly that we are not focusing on traffic-related citations? No, that is not correct. We are focusing on traffic-related Class C citations. Last question that came in is the end goal, a standardized eCitation system for the state. We are looking to standardize data. This is a statewide system that would be implemented from a state perspective. Each individual court and law enforcement agency would still have their own systems. This statewide system would basically plug into your systems. I think we have a couple of raised hands. Yvonne, Ibarra, we will unmute you for your question.
I'm sorry, this is Renan from Hidalgo County. Yvonne's here with me. So I have a couple of questions. So is the goal to make this a mandated initiative for the state? Okay, so agencies can opt out of it, right?
Yeah, we have no authority to do any kind of mandating. Our hope is that people will want to participate in it, but there's not going to be any requirement that anybody has to participate in it at this time.
Okay. So let me put my county up. So for example, here in Hidalgo, we don't do parking at all. So it's pretty much traffic. Most of the citations are DPS, which we get electronic, maybe hit and miss a little bit. But then we also have our SO that it's still on paper, and then constables, and then we'll get fish and wildlife here or there, right? Is the plan to get one of those state agencies on? Two, our Sheriff's Department is looking at a third-party vendor called CopSync. So we would then have to develop the interface from CopSync into OCA. And final question is, how are we going to get the citation? Once the data is at OCA, how do we get that down to us? I guess this is going to be a portal. The other problem we're having also... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, finally, on the DPS side, we're already getting the citations electronically, but we're having questions as far as the legality of that electronic file. Is it a true original, or should we wait for the trooper to walk in a paper ticket with a signature? I can't seem to get a straight answer out of anybody on that. So I'm thinking, you know what, shoot, what's the point of eCitation if I'm still going to be depending on the paper file, paper signature in order to move forward with a warrant or next action on delinquent items? So is any of the law going to be considered on this? Okay,
let me go ahead and answer your questions. He's going to put you back on mute. I'll try and do as best I can on the questions that I remember there. We can look into the legality issue. Nobody has brought that point up, that it's not going to be the official record. There's a lot of people using them today. I don't see that as an issue. Again, if people have existing eCitation systems that are covering everything, then all we're looking at is the interfaces to them. We're not looking to replace anything. So the people that have a system today that's working, then they're covered. All we're looking at is the interface, and we would be, so the data would go from law enforcement to the database, not to OCA, but to the database, and then to the court, back out to the court, and then the state agencies would also have access on the citations to pull it as well. Do you remember what the other questions were on that, Sam?
No.
I'll tell you what, if you want to maybe put them in writing and then we can capture those at the end. I want to go ahead and move on into Sam's presentation, but I want to make sure we get those captured. And if we don't get them addressed at this meeting, I do want to get them addressed in a follow-up afterwards. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam Lavario and let him cover.
Okay, well, thank you. I've been frantically trying to answer the several questions that have been coming in. And so we're going to switch hats, and Tom is going to start answering some of those questions that are coming in written, and I'll start with the next part of the presentation. Moving on. As far as responsibilities for the requirements team, what we're looking at is from the project charter perspective, we want to learn your different processes. All of the different courts and law enforcement offices out there use similar processes at a very high level, but once you start getting down into the more detailed processes, many of them are very, very different. So we want to learn a lot of those processes before we start nailing down some requirements for the system. We want the system to help or augment the current systems that are out there and still be able to basically connect to and pull the case level data for these traffic citations into this one statewide database. We want to learn the business rules for the different areas, different entities, regulations, things like that. So we'll need these subject matter experts, you guys, the requirements team, to help us understand at the detail level what is happening there. Clarification on the project title. The project title is the eCitation project, and I've had a lot of feedback in that a lot of folks have interpreted that as just looking at the eCitation side. We're actually looking at the entire citation process, not just electronic, but also paper. The goal is to try to make the data transfer from the time that the data is captured, whether it's at the point of citation issuance, all the way to the database. Make that data transition as efficient and reliable as possible, and as accurate as possible. So this project does cover all of the citation data, electronic and paper. Okay, moving on. Here's a screen that shows all of the counties and cities that are currently that have been invited and participating. The ones in bold have representation. The ones that are not in bold do not. Most of these that are not participating either have other projects that have pulled most of their resources away, or for some reason have not.
Hold on. Have you lost the screen? They've lost the screen.
Okay, hold on a second. Looks like we're having a technical difficulty here.
Says it looks frozen.
Right.
Okay, now it looks back.
Okay, good. The screen that you're looking at now is the list of counties and cities that are participating. As I mentioned earlier, the ones that are not in bold are not participating. They have either opted out or not been able to respond. But we have a very good representation from across the state on this, which is very good for the project, because we'll have a good understanding from across the state what each area looks like, and we can implement those customizations into the system. Okay, the requirements team right now, well, actually as of about 9 o'clock this morning, was about 89 people. It's grown a little bit, and I suspect that it will continue to grow as interest starts to grow through this project. And as you can tell, we have representation from basically all other law enforcement area levels, and the constables, police, sheriffs, And then from the courts, we have representation from the Justice of the Peace and the municipal courts. It's a very large group, so meetings like this one, where everybody's on the phone or connected, are going to be rare. Most of the meetings are going to be smaller, and we'll talk a little bit more about that further down the line. The project manager, Tom, and I are planning to visit most of the sites throughout the next couple of months, and started to make appointments and reservations to do that, to come in and sit down with each one of your areas to understand the process from the very beginning to the end. Basically, the way we're dividing this up is, for example, when we go visit the city of Lubbock, we want to sit down with the city police and the municipal court to get a very good understanding of that process. Or the county of El Paso, we want to sit down with the sheriff, the constable, and the JP, again, to get a good understanding of the process from beginning to end. There are some areas across the state that don't have full representation from all the different areas. So, for example, I may have a municipal court that is participating, but not the police department. So I'll be communicating with that municipal court, see if for this one meeting that we're coming to your town, if we can get someone from the police department to come in and talk. So so kind of expect those emails to be coming out from me. The organization of the team, of course, as I mentioned earlier, this is a very large team. It's one project requirements team, but the breakdown is we have the law enforcement teams and the court teams, and then under those are broken down further into their respective sub-teams. The reason for this breakdown is to make better use of your time. When we are looking specifically at the courts, and more specifically the municipal courts, we want to be able to meet with just the municipal court team and not have the law enforcement or others in there. So that way we can ask the questions to the groups that are pertinent to those sets of questions. Of course, all of the information is going to flow back up, so everybody should be able to see any kind of requirements or information that's captured from any of the sub-teams up to the top, to the overall team. Based on the survey results, looks like Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday afternoons are the best times to meet. So we'll try to schedule any conference calls during those times. And of course, as much as possible, I'll try to schedule those meetings as far in advance as possible so that we can get on your calendar. And I certainly understand that many of you are quite busy and could even be called away. So definitely we can understand that. Okay, now we have another couple of minutes for some questions.
Okay, one question that came up is, what are DPS and TxDOT hoping to achieve with the data once it is transferred? One of the things that we're trying to do is get data more efficiently, more timely, and more accurately to the state agencies. And if we can if we can get rid of or eliminate the issue with paper citations and the data problems that can be created there, then that can help. Also, if we're transmitting data electronically as opposed to doing data entry, again, that provides us with opportunities to improve that. DPS has expressed interest in the data on more the the disposition side of the citations, which is something that we'll be looking at, merging the dispositions and the citations together. And the TxDOT is looking at it for their crash system. There have been some questions about, are we going to change the current citation? Is there going to be a standard citation? Sam, you want to, I think you've talked about that before. You want to address that?
The current citation form, as he's currently used by law enforcement, is not going to be changing. What we will be looking at is trying to identify the standard data that should be collected on all forms, which is probably a de facto standard already. So that, and I'll probably cover that a little bit more in a couple of slides, but okay. Definitely we are looking at trying to standardize some of the data, but that will have to come from this team, from the work sessions with this team. It's not something that's going to come from us. It's coming from you guys as a team.
Amy, I'm going to unmute you. I see you have your hand raised. So I'm assuming you have a question. Amy, go.
Yes, hi. I had a quick question. So you said DPS is just going to want to kind of get more information on dispositions. Is this in addition to the automated conviction report that they're already receiving? Here in Travis County, we're uploading that to them once a week for basically all convictions on all traffic citations, and then anyone who got their case dismissed with defensive driving. So really the only thing that they're not getting currently would be, cases that were just flat out dismissed.
Correct. And we are in contact with DPS. We've met with them, and we have gotten a copy of all the fields that they're capturing. That will be brought into this, again, the requirements team to look at, to determine, is this eCitation system that's being built, is that a better vehicle to submit that information to, and then from the system to DPS, or is it direct to DPS, DPS to the system? Those are the types of questions that we'll be examining during the requirements phase of the project.
And another piece to that is the people that we've got on the phone today are the top 25 municipalities in Texas. And you guys are a lot better shape in an automated fashion than some of our other counties in the state. And so when we talked to driver's license folks earlier today, they're not getting everybody there. So the smaller municipalities are not sending data. So there are while not every court will benefit from every piece of this, there will be courts that will benefit from this that don't have it today. I've got one more hand raised here. Let's, okay. Charlotte, you've been unmuted. Would you like to ask your question? Charlotte, Booker, going once.
Okay, well, let's proceed.
Okay.
The second major goal of this project is to develop and document functional requirements for the RFO. Obviously, once the requirements are established, what we're going to do is put them into an RFO and try to determine the cost for implementing this system. Of course, the system is going to cover everything from A to Z that's determined within the requirements team. The majority of the discussions within the work sessions that we'll be having will be basically functional requirements. How do things work now? How can we improve? How can this new system help improve what's going on now? What can or should be expected from the system? How will the new system work? Who should have access? Why? Those types of questions. Where will data be captured? Will this system capture data from the law enforcement side, from the court side, from both? Data reporting, any major process areas that we would need to look at. For example, specifically, what data is captured? And as an example of that, DPS is capturing some citation data, but they're also capturing quite a bit of other data from the disposition information. So that is information that's generated at the court. It's not generated at the law enforcement side when the citation is issued. So how will we capture all that data into one system and cohesively keep it together so that there can be fairly good analytics done by the state agencies to basically make our streets safer? We'll be looking at the data transmittal processes. How is data transmitted from system to system, and how would this new system fit in? We'll be looking at reporting requirements. Are there any reporting needs for each agency, law enforcement, courts, and state agencies? On the survey, I think, if I remember correctly, the courts, about 50% of them mentioned that they would definitely benefit from enhanced reporting, and I think it was like 35 to 40% of the law enforcement agencies reported that they would benefit from it as well. So there looks like there is some need for additional reporting, whether if it's ad hoc or canned, and those are the things that we could determine as the requirements group. Another thing to look at is the accuracy of data. One of the things that has come up time and time and again is how accurate the data is. Many times when a citation is handwritten, it's difficult for whomever is doing the data entry to interpret that handwritten citation into actual data into a database. And trying to automate as much of that as possible to try to reduce the error rate. And we want to definitely look to see where those errors are and how we can possibly mitigate those errors through process change in this project. Additionally, we'll be looking at interfaces. Will data be interfacing from, as I mentioned earlier, law enforcement into the statewide database, from the courts to the statewide database? Will there be any data going back from the statewide database to the courts or to the law enforcement side? I've heard some interest from some of the municipalities that they want to see the traffic citation data for adjacent counties so that they can do their own analytics. Who has access to that data and how can they use it? Those are the types of things we want to determine in this process of requirement solicitation. As far as interfaces, 88% of you guys mentioned that your system is capable of interfacing, so it sounds like we've got a leg up on that side of the house as far as interfaces. There's a few that said no, 3%, so we'll have to look into what is going on there, and then 9% said not sure, so we can definitely find out. What I've drawn here, forgive me, I'm fairly new to courts, and I've had a steep learning curve, but I think I've got some really good people here at the OCA that have coached me quite well. And I've drawn up what I believe is the standard flow, data flow, of how citation data flows from the law enforcement side to the municipal or to the court side and then over to the state agencies. This is, again, very generic, very high level. I'm sure there are exceptions, but in general, this is what it looks like. The reason I drew this is to kind of show you a draft. This is more of a conceptual draft, something to basically throwing something up against the wall to say, hey, does this stick? Does this work? But this statewide system could conceivably provide the interface ability between the law enforcement and courts and between the courts and the state. And if you notice, there are other state agencies now in play here that would benefit from this type of data. So basically playing the traffic cop of data between these entities might be the best use for this system as far as trying to capture all of this data into one statewide database. Of course, that would be the system itself, but the interfaces would be the connections between each one of these boxes to the system itself and so forth. Okay, the third major goal is to establish standard data elements and codes where possible. One of the things that we are really interested in is the accuracy of the data. The more accurate the data, the more accurate your analytics will be. So one of the main things that we want to do as a team is settle on what are the core data elements that have to be captured every single time for each type of situation. So for example, whenever a citation is issued, we have to capture, what has to be captured is identification, like the ID number, name, birth date, and those, like I said earlier, are probably already de facto standards, but I want to document them and make sure that, hey, everybody's good with these, so that we as a group can say, hey, this is a standard we want to set. Second set of data elements are the best practices, the ones that make everybody's life and work a lot easier to be able to move forward and capture those analytics as best as possible. Of course, those would include the core data elements plus whatever additional data elements that would be identified. Again, it depends on the event or situation that we would set those classes. It's not like there's one set of data that is the core data. It will have to be one set of core data for a particular type of incident that we would have to set. So there's a bit of work to do there to try to set those data elements. And the last one is basically customized fields for local use. Some of the local municipalities may be wanting to capture additional analytics on top of what is already there, and capturing that data is important to those local municipalities. So those would be documented there as well. All of these data elements should be handled by the system, and all we basically need to do is identify them and identify how they would be used.
So at least one person say, okay, she's okay. Okay, we were having somebody said they keep getting disconnected, but maybe they're okay now.
80% of the survey respondents from the law enforcement side said that they are using pretty much the same data fields as the Department of Public Safety is. So there again, a lot of this may already be de facto standards. It's just a matter of documenting them for this project and getting them out there for everybody else to see what everybody else is doing. So, hardware requirements and software requirements. As part of the primary objective, which is to collect case-level traffic citation data into one statewide system, the team will be looking into and estimating automation needs to effectively deliver accurate data into the statewide system. These estimates will provide the project grantor, the TxDOT, will be provided to the grantor for analysis and consideration. Now, that means that we're going to estimate what it's going to take to automate a lot of these processes. And although this project is not currently funded to pay for all of this technology, identifying critical technology to make major advances in the goal of this project is key to provide to TxDOT, who is the grantor, and providing grant and financial funding in that area. So we definitely want to identify those key areas and even to a lesser importance areas that would benefit as well, not only locally but also at the state level, and provide that as a critical funding element to our project sponsors. Okay, one of the other things I wanted to mention on here is there was a survey question, planned purchase upgrade of case management systems. Court 80% said no, law enforcement 30% said no, and 50% said not sure. Basically, what this tells me, it really isn't a whole lot of movement out there to upgrade or get new systems. Either that means that the systems that are there are currently working good enough, or either the systems are working good enough, or they're just not funding for those system changes. So we'll need to kind of dig into that one a little bit more to find, what is behind this answer. Additional survey results. I asked a question about 90-minute meetings, fewer 90-minute meetings, or more 60-minute meetings, and 60-minute meetings won by about 10%. So it was pretty close. So I'll shoot for 60-minute meetings for our sub-requirements teams reviews and work sessions. 58% issued between, this is an interesting one. More than half of the courts out there, or law enforcement and courts, process between 1,000 and 25,000 traffic citations annually. There was a small percentage that listed 500,000 citations or more per year. I'm not sure if that's just an outlier, an anomaly, but I thought that was kind of interesting. Parking citations, there are nowhere near the same number of parking citations issued as there are traffic citations. That's news to me. That was interesting. If traffic citations were totally automated, basically everything is automated, you could see that there are significant time labor savings, both on the court side and on the law enforcement side. So there definitely is if there is a motivating factor, this is definitely one of them for this project to look into trying to achieve an actual savings of these, as many of these labor hours per year, so that these labor hours can be redirected to more important tasks rather than manual data entry and fixing of data errors like that. Okay, it's 2:39, and we are pretty much at the end of the slide presentation, so we wanted to leave a little extra time for questions, because I know you've got a lot of them. So, Tom?
Okay, I've unmuted. J. Elaine Marshall. I know you said you were having problems. I just unmuted you. I thought you had a question. Are you there?
Okay.
Not seeing any other hands raised at this point. There was a question about the presentation again. Yes, the presentation will have the audio, and I believe the questions will be there as well. And we'll send out a link to that. I don't know where that will reside. I'm not sure it will be on our website. But we'll send a link out to everyone once we have that. And DPS clarified that actually what they really want is the original citation data, but the disposition data is a secondary desire for them.
Okay. I think what we can do is kind of read off some of these questions that have been typed in, and answer those real quick. Will the presentation be posted? Yes. The courts have been receiving numerous bulk record requests for traffic data. Would this be something available through the ORR? I'm guessing that's
that would
OCA.
Be something that we'd have to discuss with legal.
It's definitely on the table that we can talk about it. If there are no legal issues with it, can this system be used to provide that bulk data to those requesters? I don't see why not. I mean, it's a legitimate question, and we can definitely explore it. Please hold on. Actually, I'm going to make a note of that right now so that we can talk about it as we start meeting. And that question came from. Okay. Next question is, I keep losing you. Oh, sorry. Okay. Next one is DPS interested in, and we have that one already. Okay, they currently write tickets to people with existing traffic warrants, and there is no way to close that loop. Not sure I understand the question.
There was a question about warrants, but warrants are not part of the eCitation project. So that's just, I think that was the second half of that question.
Do you plan to visit every agency participating? Tom and I are planning to visit.
We've got 23 so far, 23 sites we're visiting that'll have both courts and law enforcement, hopefully, at some of those. And hopefully we're not being arrested right now. We have some uniform watching the door here.
It wasn't me.
So we are doing basically a 5-week trip around the state of Texas. I believe Sam has reached out to all of the participating courts and agencies to try and set up a meeting. So we're just waiting to hear back to finish scheduling those.
Actually, yeah, I've reached out to about 7 or 8 of y'all. Probably in the rest of this week and next week, I'll be reaching out to the rest of the sites out there. As I mentioned earlier, the way we're structuring these meetings are to talk specifically about your specific processes to your location. A constable in Travis County their process may be a little bit different than, say, a constable in El Paso County. And what we want to try to understand is, what are the differences and why are there differences there? Because as we start to look at this statewide system, of course there should be some leeway there for customization, but we also want to look at standardization as well. So those are the things that we want to look at and try to understand before we jump into this and try to build a system that will step on everything. So those meetings are specifically for specific processes that are indigenous to those different areas. There will be additional meetings with the different groups, and if actually, let me see if I can get back to the presentation. I can show you here. If you look at the got my screen blocked here. Okay. If you look at this, I will definitely be calling meetings with the local municipal teams. So basically, all the municipal teams, court teams that across the state, have a meeting with that group talking specifically about how those municipal courts do things. Talk about, well, this municipal court does it this way, that municipal court does it this way. Is this something that we can all agree on that, hey, it makes sense that we all do it the same, or that everybody has to do it differently and the system adapts to that? So those are the kinds of questions, sometimes a little uncomfortable, but we want to talk about those things to see if there are ways that we can make the system as efficient as possible at pulling that data in. If it is a situation where the system has to adapt, then we'll be talking about, okay, so we're getting data this way from this system, and we're getting data this way from that system. Once it all comes together, how are we going to make it work or match up at the back end? And as we start to working through those problems, then we'll determine, okay, this is the best route to take. Let's make it match at the back end, and then we'll set a translate table and what have you. But those are all discussions that we'll be having to at that level for those different types of what I would call the sub-teams. Once those decisions are made at this level, then bringing everybody together to talk about at the law enforcement side or the court side, either one, and then the entire team. Now, one of the things to understand, and this team is critical to the project in not only providing the information, but also providing a consensus that, hey, this makes sense. I and Tom will be looking to you to provide consensus towards the end of the project that this set of requirements is good. We're good. We don't want this set of requirements to, as I mentioned earlier, to step all over your processes. We don't want it to break what you're doing. We want an overall system that augments and helps your processes as a whole. Any other questions, Tom?
Yeah, I've got a few. I've got somebody that has their hand raised. Let's see if they have. Devada Posey, you have your hand raised. I've unmuted you. You have a question?
Yes. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this project. So are you talking about only developing the eCitation interface? We're not talking about anything to do with the case management system, just being able to interface with the case management system, or is it going to include that?
Our plan is to interface with existing case management systems.
Okay.
Or as we move through the project, if we have courts that do not have an existing case management system, it may be possible as part of this project that we can have identified a case management system that they could purchase, maybe at a reduced cost, maybe with some grant funding. I mean, that's a little bit down the road, but what our creation is going to be basically is a giant database with the citation data and the disposition data in it, and then interfaces to existing systems at local law enforcement or at the local court, so the court case management system, and to also look at, are there places where we can provide technology if funding is available, or at least provide some standards for if you want to go out and buy a bunch of electronic ticket writers, you know, here is a standard ticket writer that you could use that would work with this process, not that you would have to buy that. If you need a case management system, that might be in scope. That remains to be seen. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is have this big back-end database and then interfaces between all the systems that exist out there today. And if someone asked a while back about what system interfaces exist today. Can you talk about that at a high level from what you've found so far, Sam?
There are some system interfaces. Obviously, from the case management systems, there are the crude interfaces from your system over to the DPS system. We have some roll-up data that comes over to the OCA. I think some of the vendors that are being used right now provide interfaces to the state as well as to the case management systems that are locally. There's basically a hodgepodge of several types of interfaces out there. Again, the interfaces is, in my mind, I could be completely wrong on this, but in my mind, it seems like most systems out there are capable of interfacing. It's just basically identifying what are the interfaces that are out there, how are they being used, and can this system provide anything better, or can this system augment and help those systems? As Tom mentioned earlier, the primary goal here is to get statewide data into one centralized database. The supporting goals around that is basically to effectively, reliably, and accurately get that data as quickly as possible from the point that the citation is issued into this database. The quicker we can get it there, the more successful the project will be. Accurately, timely, and efficiently. Make sense? Any other questions from your Tom?
There might be some answer.
We still have about 10 minutes.
There's Matthew Freeman has a pretty lengthy one if you want to take that one on while I'm responding to this other one here. Sure is. And if it seems like there's a lot of we can't answer your questions right now, it's because we're at the very front end of this process. We know what the end goal is, as Sam described, but how we get there, a lot of that's going to depend on what kind of information we receive when we go out and meet with the folks out in the courts, out in local law enforcement, to see what it is that's needed to help us meet that goal and to provide y'all with more efficient technology in the cases where you don't have it. If you already have something in place today that works that's great, then that's one less thing we'll have to worry about. But as we start meeting with everybody in early May and we sit down and have our interviews with everyone, then we can start formulating this better. And as you see the requirement documents start to form over the summer months, that'll kind of give a better big picture. But right now we're really just at the front end of what this project's going to entail here.
Okay, a question by Matthew Freeman. Will we be working to combine information on current standards, uniform information collected on citations, work processes, best practices to develop a data communication between local agencies to a data hub for distribution to state federal agencies? Yes, correct. We are not formulating an actual electronic citation template to use for eCitation data collections. And the answer to that is no. As far as the forms and what is on those forms, whether if it's electronic forms or even paper forms, that's still up to the law enforcement agency or the courts to determine how they want. Part of this project is to establish standard data elements that need to be on each one of those forms. We don't want to get into the business of saying this is the form that everybody's going to use, whether if it's electronic or not. That's totally up to the different local municipalities and the counties. And the reason for that is primarily because it gives you, the local municipalities and counties, the flexibility for your own fields to add your own data and customize those forms however you want. So hopefully that answers your question, Mr. Freeman.
I don't see any additional. I don't have any hands raised.
Next question was, what are DPS and TxDOT hoping to achieve with the data once it's transferred?
And we talked about that.
Yeah, we covered
some of these
that
have already been answered that are up above that, or if not all of them. We just answered them over the phone as opposed to in writing.
Presentation will definitely be posted. Okay. Any other questions? Please raise your hand and we'll unmute you.
Or if you're typing a question, if you want to raise your hand so we know you're typing. We've still got a few more minutes. We're not going to rush off, but we don't want to keep you any longer, and you need to be kept either.
Okay. Either we've answered all the questions or we've lost them.
And for those of y'all that are on the call that we've sent out trying to get a meeting set up, that the number one thing we're looking for right now is to get those meetings scheduled. Sam and I are pretty much going to be on the road every day of the week for like 5 weeks solid, so we're kind of trying to get that put together as quickly as we can so we can book our plane flights or our rental cars, as the case may be. So that would help us tremendously if we can get responses on those.
One little addition to a question that's asked a couple of times here, the PowerPoint presentation will be posted out there, as will a recording of this session. Hopefully we can get a good recording of it and post it out there for anybody that was not able to catch the session. And I'll send out an email kind of explaining where everything is with URLs, and so that we can get everybody up to speed. Again, meetings will probably be, as far as work sessions, will be scheduled for Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday afternoons for 1 hour each. And hopefully I can get on your all schedule at least a month in advance. Here in the next couple of weeks, you all should be getting at least 2 meeting invitations, one for an actual visit, on-site visit, and then the second and possibly third for follow-up questions for as far as overall process, looking at getting agreement from across the different subunits as far as standardization and identifying current processes and standardization of those processes and data therein. Okay, not seeing any other questions?
The list of participating cities on the PowerPoint include all cities involved in the program?
Yes.
Those are the cities that have responded to our request for representation, but that doesn't mean that when we develop the system and put it out that those other cities won't be able to take advantage of it. They just might not have had as much of a say in the direction that it goes.
Okay, well, perfect.
Wait, there's one more question here about DPS. The purpose of DPS getting citation data directly from the agency that issued a citation prior to the person having an opportunity to be heard in court.
Okay, right now I don't believe DPS is getting that data.
Tell you what, to make this easier, Major Palmer, I'm going to unmute you if you'd like to address this directly as representative of DPS. You're unmuted at this point.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Basically what DPS wants to do is we want to be able to take the citation data. It doesn't matter whether it's convicted or not. We just want the citation data to be able to match to crashes and other activities to see how they overlap. So whether there's a conviction or not doesn't really have any impact. It's something that the more real time that we can get the data, the more we can analyze. And the intent is so that I know a lot of times, me being somebody that 20 years ago worked for a local agency, people are always wondering, you know, what do I get out of it? And it is our intention through our Texas Highway Patrol Highway Safety Operations Center to be able to provide some of this analysis back to local agencies, and we do want to find ways to be able to share that data amongst agencies that want to do their own analysis of it. Because right now, you know, we have great insight as to the enforcement activity basically in the rural areas, but we need to see how the local areas impact as well. So if we've got access to basically statewide citation data, we can get a better idea of what types of problems and where those problems are, and then we can work in concert with police departments and sheriff's departments to try to attack whatever the problem is. Because most problems don't just reside in the city or out in the county somewhere. They, you know, by their very nature, they're mobile, so there's fluctuations both directions. So that's, hopefully that makes sense, but that's the general purpose.
Thank you. I do not see any more questions. I don't have any hands raised. We got 2:59. I say we turn them loose.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for your time. Like I say, as we come out and meet with everybody, we'll be able to give you a lot more detail as we get one-on-one and start talking through this. And stay tuned. A lot more is coming. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.